Hello, everybody. We are back. We've got our next talk here for you. We have Sarah Soward here, who's going to be talking about what she created, illustrating the Rhinoceros Sutra. It's very, very interesting. So, if we are ready to go?
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Okay. Cool. I'm taking over. Great. Hello, everybody. I am Sarah Soward with a hard O, like someone who sows seeds, Sarah Soward. And I'm going to talk to you for a little while about the Rhinoceros Sutra as translated by Thanissaro Bhikkhu and rhinos in general, because I can't help myself. And I have a lovely slide deck here for us to go through to keep things interesting. So the Rhinoceros Sutra is an early Buddhist text that focuses on the benefits of a solitary ascetic life, and it urges us to consider what we need versus what we desire, and breaks down many of the facets of living in society or social groups of any sort so that the reader can see what may be creating turmoil or extraneous cravings or even just drama in their lives, and presents a choice. How do you want to live? So as you're going to see in the 3 stanzas that I've got illustrated here as part of this show, the text of the stanza seems to present a clear, hardline choice, but the expectation is not that people are going to choose to cut themselves off entirely from others or become strict hermits. The stanzas are meant to provoke thought and consideration. My friend and art colleague, Ashli Kingfisher, and I are working on a project to create illustrations for each stanza of the sutra. There are over 40 stanzas, and we're making art based off of about 20 of them each, so we're going halvesies. We're creating about 1 to 3 artworks on average for this per month so far, and posting them in various online forms as we go. And I'm going to have links at the end of the presentation if anyone's curious about seeing any more of them. And we're both approaching this project with beginner's mind, where we're making our best attempts to remove our preconceptions and be open to and excited about learning. We both have backgrounds in education, so it's natural for us to then take what we learn and create and share it with other people. The 3 works I'm talking about today are called Enmeshed and Butterflies, No Prey Today, and Sporting in Love. So Enmeshed and Butterflies is the first one. It shows a one-horned rhino floating like a cloud and using similar colors, white and gray, while surrounded by flitting yellow butterflies. The majority of my work, both here and in general, is based on my own photo reference. In the case of the mass of butterflies, I actually went a little outside my normal routine, and I watched slow motion videos of butterflies to try to better figure out what they looked like in the air. And it answered big questions for me, such as where their body is in relation to their wings at different stages of the flying cycle. Those abdomens move, dude. They do some crazy things while the wings are flapping. And the wings kind of go in this neat sort of almost like elliptical / figure 8 pattern. Very awesome. So once I had all that kind of worked out in my mind, put the videos away, and I went into Adobe Illustrator, which is where all of my designs for this project are being constructed. And I just used the blob brush to make myself some basic butterfly shapes and some cute little antennae, and went for it. The rhinos take a little more time because their shapes are much more specific. And for that, I use my own photo reference. All right, so this brings us to the 3rd stanza of the Rhinoceros Sutra. And this slide I'll just read to you. So, one whose mind is enmeshed in sympathy for friends and companions neglects the true goal, seeing this danger in intimacy, wander alone like a rhinoceros. All right, so this piece is called Enmeshed and Butterflies. The butterflies are yellow, and yellow is the color I most often use to denote sadness and love and loss throughout the breadth of my work and like for decades. The rhino here is beset, but also lifted up by fluttering yellow butterflies. There's a passage in a book by Carlos Castaneda where a character is, if I remember correctly, transformed into or by a kaleidoscope of butterflies as she transcends this life. And I don't remember the writing exactly clearly, but variations of that image stuck with me. So every time I read this stanza, the image just pummels the front of my mind, a whirlwind of tiny flapping wings and unknown intentions, lifting someone into the sky until they're gone forever. And then the question, do we give everything we are to the butterflies, or do we wander alone into the distance? At any rate, one of the ways to look at the Rhinoceros Sutra is to think of the philosophies as part of a practice to develop patterns of behavior. And with that in mind, as well as a desire to have both rhinos and the sutra as more a part of the integral lives of people, Ashli and I are making patterns for many of our works that can then be put onto textiles of all sorts and hopefully turned into really cool things. So ta-da, patterns, baby. So we have 3 examples of patterns based on the original artwork I made. There's a strict grid pattern on the left, just the butterflies in the center, and then the combo again on the right, but this time it's in a vertical brick formation so that the lines of symmetry and motion are more diagonal, which kind of lends them to actually looking somewhat more on the line of chaos and increasing the level of motion. All right, moving on to the next one. No prey today. So we've got a dusty rose-colored rhino smiling in front of a pattern of lionesses and lions. And the rhino may be standing in front of the predators or actually on them. That is for you to choose. I gave you a hint of what I think about it with the placement of that shadow. And this is the 6th stanza of the Rhinoceros Sutra, which says, in the midst of companions, when staying at home, when going out wandering, you are prey to requests. Valuing freedom, wander alone like a rhinoceros. That refrain, by the way, wander alone like a rhinoceros, is at the end of pretty much every stanza. It's sort of the basic tenet of the whole sutra. Solitude, finding your own path, whatever that means to you. All right. So I got stuck on the word and the idea of prey with this one. I needed that rhino to clearly be free of anything that could harm it, to keep things calm, because I didn't want it to be all scary. The color theory in this piece is based on a color triad. So that's 3 colors evenly spaced around the color wheel. In this case, they're close to the primary colors, yellow, magenta, and cyan, but I muted them and toned them so it's not so bright and in your face. The rhino, front and center, too large to be harmed by the tiny little lions, whether it's due to scale or distance, that rhino is going to be just fine. And if you're looking at this and you're thinking dude, lions live in Africa. What is she doing with an Indian rhinoceros? Well, cool thing. The one-horned rhino, as drawn here, right? They live in Asia. There's 2 species of one-horned rhino. They both live in Asia. The greater one-horned rhino, also called the Indian rhino, what's left of his territory is now in northern India and southern Nepal, kind of around where the border is. And there is also this awesome lion that is the Asiatic lion. It's a thing. Asiatic lions, their territory is super tiny right now. But it used to include areas that most likely overlapped with the territory of the greater one-horned rhino. So I didn't stretch too far out of the realm of reality here, even though we're pretty solidly in the realm of surrealism. Patterns. So for the patterns, I focused on the predators who are not traditionally prey. If you look closely, you can see the colors of the rhino in those diagonal lines that are streaming from the cat's feet. So the rhino is still there in spirit. And I spent a lot of time on this pattern just trying to get those tiny little diagonal lines to match up from one tile to the next. It was meditative and painful all at the same time, but I think it was worth it. All right. Sporting in Love is our next and final piece I'm going to talk about. So with this one, 3 rhinos grace this piece. They are set against a mosaic background, sort of fashioned after an argyle pattern. The largest rhino purposely, and again happily, fades into the background away from the 2 rhinos that are interacting in the foreground. And here we have the 7th stanza of the Rhinoceros Sutra. And while I'm here, let me just mention that there are different versions of the Rhinoceros Sutra. The one that we're basing our work off of is the one specifically translated from the Pali language by Thanissaro Bhikkhu, and it has them in a specific order, and so that's what we stick with. And it always ends with wander like a rhinoceros. There's some conversation that has been going on. Actually, it's a heated debate. It's been going on for a long time about whether or not it should be translated into rhinoceros or rhinoceros horn. We're going with rhinoceros because it makes more logical sense to myself and to Ashli. Whether or not the experts agree with us in the long run, who knows? Who knows? There are 2 very, very dedicated camps to this. So the stanza. There is sporting and love in the midst of companions and abundant fondness for offspring. Feeling disgust at the prospect of parting from those who would be dear, wander alone like a rhinoceros. This one's a little tough for me, maybe for many people, especially right now in the middle of a deadly pandemic where isolation is a near constant. At least it is in my part of the world in LA County, like sheltering in place, social distancing, it is very real here. So anyway, we are asked to consider here if the suffering of losing someone we love, perhaps completely out of the blue, is worse than choosing to be away from them, where we're in control of when and how we say goodbye. And to pull this out of the personal, let's talk about the rhinos again. So the larger rhino is blending back into a mosaic pattern that could easily represent the structure of life or the world or even the essence of whatever reality really is. There's no ground there that the rhino is clearly standing on, as opposed to the better defined rhinos in the foreground who are sort of making their own ground. You can see the lines under their feet there and are separated from that idea of the fabric of being. I get a little symbolic and nerdy, and I think it's fun. All right, 3 pattern tiles here, or sections rather. So we've got an argyle design. So on the left, smaller clusters of the rhino trio. And then the middle one is sort of a close-up of the same thing. So you can see a little more clearly that the rhino's clusters are different sizes, and that's the scale changes are happening on purpose because order isn't perfect. So you've got sort of order behind and a touch chaos in front, and none of it's actually random. But there you go. And then on the right, you just have the argyle patterns. You can see what that looks like without having rhinos in front. All right. And I'm going to close with a little bit more rhino information because I love them and you should all know how amazing and fabulous they are, even if it's just like 35 seconds of talking about it. So there are 5 rhino species. The one-horned rhinos, we've got 2 of them. The greater one-horned rhino, it's the one that lives in Nepal and northern India. And then we also have the other one-horned rhino, which is the Javan rhino, the 4th one over in that lineup. And that one also lives in Asia, but more in like the Indonesian island area. And then there are 3 species that have 2 horns. Of them, 2 live on the continent of Africa. That's the black rhino and the white or the square-lipped rhino. So the square-lipped rhino, the white rhino, is the only ground raiser among all 5 species, and it's the largest of them, along with the greater one-horned rhino. So in this graphic by the International Rhino Foundation and presented on rhinos.org, they've got them organized basically from largest to smallest, from left to right. And that last one on the end there is the smallest, and I think one of the cutest, personally. It's called the Sumatran Rhino. They also live in Asia, and they are hairy and sometimes actually reddish brown in color. So fairly unique even amongst the rhino species, which themselves, you know, are kind of a unique creature. They have amazing angles and shapes and negative spaces, and it makes them so much fun to draw and paint and make art about. And then finally, ta-da, all of the things. So if you want to see more of my work in general, whether it's oil painting or books I'm writing, which this is turning into a book with my friend Ashli Kingfisher, I've got Rhinotopia Beginnings coming out. I've already got Self-Portraits of the Apocalypse published. So there's art, there's writing, there's who knows what else I'm making on sarahsoward.com. And then there's the all and sundry sorts of social media things. Okay, that's it for me. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, we're waiting on seeing if questions. This is very, very cool. Thank you for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah. Can you could you tell us how did you get like what's the story of your interest in rhinoceroses?
My rhino addiction?
Yes.
It started in 1999. I'm not even kidding. I had a very dear friend of mine go off to Mexico for like 2 years, and she didn't really say where she was going or how long she'd be gone. She just left and didn't come back for 2 years. And then all of a sudden she reappeared and was like, hey, I got married. And so I stuffed all of my feelings about that inside of me deeply because I was mostly excited she was back and wanted to be happy for her. So the first words out of my mouth were, what do you want for a wedding present? Like beyond even like, hi, and how are you? And what do you mean? It was just like, what do you want for a wedding present? And she said, paint me rhinos, because they were her favorite animal. And because I'm a nerd, I researched them. And I fell in love with them. And I painted her one rhino painting. And then there were 2 rhino paintings. And then there were 5. And then there was a show. And then there's been like a bunch of shows. And now there's probably over 60 or 70 rhino paintings at this point, because I've been painting them off and on since 1999. So yeah, the life of a wildlife painter. I got a little transfixed early, and it's been good.
Very cool. Yeah. So you do a lot with the endangered wildlife. And all of these patterns. What any other particular animals that you're obsessed with aside from the rhino?
In terms of making art, the rhino is the big one. I really enjoy painting stripes, I've found. So tigers and zebras are happening more and more. In general, like in the rest of my life, for things whether I paint them or not, I love vultures and snakes. Snakes are not that much fun for me to paint, though. It's a lot of scales, and I haven't found a way to make that not drive me insane yet, but maybe someday.
They'd be good for patterns, but I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
That's a lot.
That is a lot. Well, that's very cool.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not saying any other things, but yeah, so thanks so much for sharing. And you can see Sarah's artwork here in the gallery as well, or on the webpage, or honestly at any of those links that are there. Yeah. And so we'll take a little bit of a break here. The next talk is going to be at 6:30, and that will be a panel of Crashspace members talking about 10 plus years of Crashspace.
Rockin'.
So yeah, we'll see everybody back here at 6:30. All right, cool.
Thank you. Goodbye.